Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of CTO Craft Bytes. My name is Niruban. I am one of the directors of Albany. Albany are trusted and recommended hiring partners to the CTO Craft community. And our purpose is simple. We build high-performing product and engineering teams right from the C-suite right down to individual contributors. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Sasha Bilton. Hey, Sasha.
Hey.
Nice to have you here. Today, Sasha and I are going to be talking about how to identify and develop future engineering leaders. So this is a subject that's relevant to different camps of people, whether you're an engineering leader with a large team or small team, or if you're on that trajectory to becoming an engineering leader. So interested to know which camp you sit in. Before we get started, there's an option for you to send in questions. I think it's titled Ask a Question. So please do send any questions you've got. We will spend probably about 10 minutes at the end trying to answer as many as we can. So, Sasha, obviously you and I have known each other for a long time, right? And worked together in many different capacities.
We have, yes. I think I remember speaking to you on the phone when I was a contracting Java developer. So yeah,
Vibrant Media days.
Your pre-Vibrant Media days, I think, even actually. Yeah. But yes.
So yeah, genuinely, thank you for your time. I know you're a busy guy, so it makes me happy to be doing this for the first time with you today. So let's start with a quick introduction into you,
Sure.
And also why this subject is so important to you as an individual.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm Sasha. I'm the CTO at Planday, which is a fantastic company. We provide scheduling software as a platform that provide so many essential services, be it delivering food, health, hotels. There's a massive group of people who work shifts, and it's quite a complex process. There's lots of legal compliance, and a lot of organizations have their own ways of doing things that we encompass. It's a lot of fun. It's based in their headquarters are in Copenhagen, so I get to travel to Copenhagen frequently. It's a big digital organization, so we have plenty of tech teams, and we have lots of aspiring managers, leaders, and people who perhaps don't know that they're ready for leadership, but are, and people who don't necessarily want to be in leadership, but want to understand how they can continue to grow their career, which is an equally important strand of kind of career growth and actually leadership, because there's, you have soft leadership, which is where you don't actually have people reporting to you, but you're very influential. So yeah, it's something that I think I came to leadership through frustration with not always building the right thing right, which is what I think technology leaders should be aiming for. And I got lucky, really, and I think that people deserve a better way of experiencing the route to leadership.
So you mean having more of a clearer path, do you mean, maybe?
Yeah. And also, I think it's something that as leaders, technology leaders, we haven't really focused on is, how do we identify people? How do we grow them? How do we encourage people to take on that mantle? It's just been a kind of, in many jobs, you have like things that you also have to do. And it isn't always seen as the most important thing, but actually it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
And it's very important to me because I love, as a personal thing, I love that thing where you see somebody just really, really thriving and becoming awesome. And yeah, it's wonderful.
the growth part,
Yeah,
helping someone to develop and grow their careers. Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
it's great.
So let's talk about nurturing homegrown talent. I suppose developing talent within
Yeah,
is really one of the, is really important when shaping an engineering culture. How do you go about identifying and nurturing talent within your team?
I think in general, I think that curiosity is such a strong indicator of somebody who's ready to grow. Um, Therefore, if they're showing curiosity into the structures, the strategy, the tactical events around producing software, then that's an indicator that they're probably ready to be considered for leadership roles. I think some people do it because I think some people get into leadership in tech because they're worried that they're not technical enough. And I don't think people should ever worry about that. But I think that it's a honest self reflection. People are usually better than they think they are at everything. Um,
Yeah,
and I think it's about it's it depends where you are. It depends on the scale of the organization, right? If you're a CTO of a large organization, you can't necessarily have individual relationships with every single individual contributor. So that
yeah,
thing of taking somebody to the next stage, to the team leadership stage, or the sort of principal engineer stage, is difficult to do when you're in a large organization. So let's forget about where people are, but let's just talk about the people you do have relationships with and that you do get to know. And that
yeah,
is very important. And once you start understanding people and you start listening to people, and it is the listening that's the key thing here, you get a sense of whether they're ready for the next stage, whatever that is, whether it's going from IC to leadership or higher up the leadership chain, if you
yeah.
like.
Have you got any maybe examples or success stories of people
Oh
that you've
yeah,
worked with without not
yeah.
having to name names, right?
I
But
won't name names, but
yeah,
she is doing an in-person talk tonight, I think.
amazing.
Yeah, somebody who was a team lead, and we I was stretched too thin at the time, so I had 11 teams as an engineering manager, and so we were looking to expand the engineering management role, and I had somebody who a lot of people applied. We had a very rigorous process because there were a lot of internal applicants, which meant that making it very transparent, very visible, very fair was essential, because the last thing you want to do is make people feel like they don't matter
Yeah,
within an organization, which is where everybody can see what the result is. And so we went through a vigorous process of figuring out who the right people were to take forward. We had scoring systems. This individual, I think, had a little bit of she was quite nervous in certain stages, but her empathy and sympathy, her emotional intelligence, her ability to listen to others and to gather up people around her who were great, and get them even further along, was tremendous. And and now she's uh, working. She's a coach. She does all sorts
amazing.
of different roles, and she helped me recently and I was doing some in-person coaching, and it was very much like I was not the master in the room. She was
Right.
brilliant at what she was doing. So
The
that was
master
fantastic.
became the mastee almost.
Exactly. Yes, I was very much learn. And I mean I'm always learning, but it really felt like wow, this is fantastic. I'm
Nice.
picking up so much from her. So that was awesome. And but several sort of similar kind of
Similar
instances, and
story.
people going off and becoming CEOs of their own
Yeah,
companies and things like that, who were quite junior, and you could tell they had so much drive and intelligence, and convincing them to do things that push them out of their comfort zone so
yeah,
that they could achieve more, they could broaden their horizons, so that when they
yeah.
took on more important roles, they had some experience, some understanding, they had greater empathy for the people that they were going to be leading. It fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. How does growing talent internally, in your view, compare to bringing in external leaders? Because that's a toss up, right?
It's a tough one. It's a good question, because I sort of have a bit of a, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but I have a bit of a rule for myself, which is try not to take a job that I could easily do.
Yeah,
Obviously lean on my experience, but I always want to be growing myself. Um,
100%.
so if I'm saying when you bring in somebody external, you want somebody who can really nail that job, does that go against it? Well, I would say no. It's more like 70%. You want somebody to be able to do 70% of the role, and bringing somebody externally in gives them more context. They have a wider,
Yeah,
probably they've got a wider recent experience, right? And they can bring in uh, values, experiences, ways of working, and a network, which you should never dismiss, um, that somebody internally can't. But then somebody internally has built up an internal network. They know how the systems work. They know how probably they know how some of the code base works. All
it's
of
that
the
culture as
the
well.
culture, all those things. So they both have a great deal of value, and it's a very tricky. I would always slightly side on the side of internal hiring, because I think it's great for the organization to see that there are those opportunities within the company. So I
I think it
think that
depends on the type of organization as
it
well,
does,
probably.
yeah, it
Well,
does depend on the type of organization. But I absolutely want to signal to people that there are places to go within the organization, almost
yeah,
always, right?
yeah,
So that thing of growing talent from within is super valuable. But there are times when you look around and you go, we're weak in this area, and let's bring somebody in to strengthen
yeah,
us.
yeah,
And it does allow you to be a little bit more laser focused on what you need when you're
yeah.
hiring externally. Yeah,
Externally, yeah.
yeah,
How about diversity and inclusion? It's obviously, very, very, very important topic. It's one that's over the last few years become a core spotlight for a lot of companies for
yeah,
obvious reasons.
yeah.
How does this play a part in
Massively,
developing? Yeah,
massively. And I think um, diversity and inclusivity have become quite divisive. And honestly, I think it's extremely unfair and frankly ignorant to um, to discount it,
yeah,
because you want different opinions, right? You to solve hard problems, which is the thing that we're often doing. You want different opinions. If you hire people with the same background as the with the same experience as you, and remembering that software is almost always for people, right?
yeah,
You're building software for your customers who are not necessarily like you. Having people who aren't like you around is incredibly important. And I have seen time and again circumstances where not having a diverse group of people have been costly, have slowed problems down, and where having a variety of voices has accelerated growth within
Yeah.
organizations. There is a very, very strong business case for diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah, 100%. So let's move on to retention and engagement.
Yeah.
We actually did a compensation survey with CTO Craft earlier this year. I've got an interesting stat to do with retention. So this is probably more aimed at the leadership level
Yeah.
because that's what the survey was with. But 41% of engineering leaders out of the people that we did the survey with are actually looking to leave their current business. For different reasons, 65% of respondents said it was due to a lack of faith in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That percentage actually increased slightly below the C level, so at VP and director level.
Yeah.
Then that was followed by 42% of respondents having concerns around culture and performance, and then 33% around poor line management. So yeah, in
Really
terms of that, yeah, what do you think of those stats? I mean,
I think one of the things that I think is super interesting about it is that from that, half as many people are thinking of leaving because of poor direct leadership,
yeah,
than good strategic leadership.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organizations struggle with getting. All organizations want to grow, right? And I think a lot of companies struggle getting past a stage, right?
Yeah.
And only even the biggest companies, if we talk about something like Apple or Nvidia or something like that, what is the next stage for them, right? There's always a stage where you kind of you stop, and because of the way we're structured, quite often growth is super important. And when we hit a phase in an organization's life cycle where the growth reduces, there can be quite a lot of tension. There can be quite a lot of friction between teams, departments, people, leadership who have generally found it relatively easy to go forward. We had this great idea. We're all around it. We're just doing it. It's great. Everyone feels really super motivated. You get to a point where that's no longer enough and you have to really change how you work. You have to go through a transformation. And I think that is very, very painful. Transformations are very difficult. And often organizations sit on the cusp of a transformation for a long time. And that is I've been in organizations like that, and it doesn't, you've lost a sense of energy. And that you can squarely put at the feet of the senior leadership. So I do understand that, and I think it's one of the things. I'm a CTO, right? I have a certain amount of ego. It can be very difficult to admit that you need help at that level, and you will see that the people who you've promoted and you've hired, who sit at the extended leadership level, the level below, they're super smart, right? They have ideas that can maybe able to take the organization out of that phase and into the next one, and they're frustrated that they're not able to do so. And I think that's one of the reasons why really good organizations aren't so hierarchical when it comes to listening. You can have 100 layers, right? But if you're always listening, it doesn't matter that there's that there are all these layers. And then I've seen organizations that have a fairly flat structure, but it's very command and control. So information only flows up. It doesn't flow down. There's no real conversation.
So how do we, I think a lot of those things can probably lead to things like burnout, disengagement.
Yeah, exactly.
Within the layers beneath. So how do we spot those signs, and also follow on from that?
Yeah.
How do we re-engage somebody that might be disengaged?
Spotting signs can be tough at this level. Disengage because quite often the people, you're often the last, as somebody's manager, you can be the last person that person disengages from. So they might be disengaging from their responsibilities, but you don't see it because you're having one-to-ones, and in the one-to-ones that you don't see so much change, and that's why having methods of feedback from that are wider than just the individual you're talking to, 360s, all of the things that are quite painful in organizations to do, give you more information points. You need to look for data points that allow you to sense whether somebody is struggling, because as somebody's boss, effectively, you're often the last person to see it. Sometimes it will come through with, if you're good at metrics, you can see some of the metrics are beginning to slip, and when you suggest that we need to focus on them, you can sense a certain reluctance. But sometimes the first thing is when somebody hands in their resignation.
Of course.
Yeah,
and that's probably too late then, right?
And that's often too late. And one of the ironies is that I think people who talk about quitting in some ways are more resilient than others. So I've seen it where I've been surprised by people because they've handed in a resignation, where they have a peer who's like, I'm so sick of this. This is driving me nuts. I'm really thinking about leaving, because that's a flag to say, hey, please come and help me. And you're able to do that. So really, you've kind of, particularly when you can observe that things are stressful in general, that the organization is going through change. Even though the change is necessary, you think the change is good, that might not be the lived experience for the team around you, and you should go in and ask, and actually just ask the right questions.
About having some, I think that comes down to emotional intelligence, right? And knowing that there's issues going on, and I suppose addressing them with your team before it becomes a problem. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think tech can be notoriously a bit lagging on emotional intelligence sometimes, but emotional intelligence is one of those things that you can learn, right? You can build it into your management system, and it's more important to ask the question because it's on a script in front of you than not ask it because it doesn't feel genuine. Because after a while, it will just become a muscle memory, and it will become genuine, and you'll start to see value from it, and all of a sudden you'll be like, okay, light bulb comes on. It's like, this is fantastic, and you'll get really into it. So asking questions, asking how people are really doing. And how's that working out for you?
How's that working? Just a reminder to anyone that's got any questions, please do send them through on the ask a question function. Let's move on to leadership pathways. There's no one size fits all for this, right? But what are the more common pathways that you see? And also, how do you guide engineers towards those different pathways? Probably the most relevant one, or the most common two you see, is technical over people, right? So what do you see, and how do you guide people towards them?
I like I like the Amazon model, which is everyone is an engineer up until the point of making a choice between the kind of principal staff engineer route and the leadership route. I think they're both very difficult. They both have huge amounts of leadership. I think one of the things that people need to remember is that if they're undertaking a principal engineering route, then they are a coach and a mentor first and foremost. They are there to help and enable teams to do their jobs in a slightly different way. to a team lead who is there to help and enable teams to do their jobs. So the strap line is the same. It's the way you go about it is different. And I think that people actually move backwards and forwards between them quite happily. Like it's absolutely okay to do one and then move over to the other if you have the right frame of mind. They're both incredibly valuable. The team lead is very technical still, very technical. But you don't have to be the expert in things.
Yeah.
You know, it's about asking. It's always about asking questions, but you know, architecture and code reviews, and you know how we work with other teams and APIs and what have you. And then the principal route is a hands-on role where you are building software, but you float between different teams and different areas, and your code is an exemplar, right? It is that thing of people can look at it and go, that's the right way to write code here, and talk about it and explain it and you know, pair with people. Well, not pair because you know, pairing is actually two people who are about the same level, but actually just coaching in ways of writing code and looking at architecture and quality and those sorts of things. And I think they're really great routes. I'm so happy that we have those now, because I used to see people who were forced.
It's definitely changed over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Well, I mean, back in the day, you know, there was only the team lead, and you almost became a project manager, and you ended up losing great developers who had poor leadership skills, because the only way that they could get a pay rise was by going into leadership, and they were frustrated. Everyone was frustrated. It didn't work, and now we have this, and it's great.
How do we encourage people that might be more introverted but are you know, have the capability to be a good leader, but it's not, they're not, you know, naturally confident, you know, over that scenario, over being maybe blindsided by somebody that is really confident, and actually they're not actually that capable when it comes down to it, but they kind of shout the loudest. Like how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because you only have so much time and visibility yourself, and you can get swamped by extrovert behavior that seems competent. I think, excuse me, with introverts, sometimes it's about looking at the work that they do around their job. You know, they may be volunteering for documentation processes around improving workflows, tool building, those sorts of things. And what that is saying in a way is, you know, I want to be more valuable. I want to be a multiplier, because leadership is about being a multiplier, right? You're multiplying those around you. And you can do that through technical means, as well as and through written communication. And then with introverts, it's really important to have one-to-ones, and in those one-to-ones, big them up, right? You know, because often the other thing that you find about introverts is that in a one-to-one setting, they're amazing communicators.
Yeah.
So and it is that thing of, like, you know, just pick one per, you know, if you have to talk to 5 people, just pick one imaginary person and talk to them, and ignore the 5 people who are actually in the room. And then with people who are sort of shouting loud, then ask questions. How would you do it? You know, you've what's your suggestion on getting these things actually fixed? And then you'll get an idea of whether how competent they are in the actual problem solving area.
Yeah, kind of put your money where your mouth is type
exactly
thing.
Yeah, basically. Yes, in a nice way. Yeah.
So let's move on to the whole remote first world that we operate in. I think since COVID, things have definitely changed. Some
Yeah,
form of remote working is here to stay.
yeah.
So how do you spot and nurture leadership potential when you're not in the same room, right?
It's
When it's
yeah, it's absolutely hard. Harder. I think one of the things to do is to try and get time with other people, like try and have one-to-ones, right? And ask them how they feel the team is doing, and they may well then talk about an individual um, who is showing some exceptional qualities. Um, because I think it's actually in some ways I think it's harder to be to kind of big yourself up over Zoom than it
yeah,
is face to face, because you kind of see that body language when you're together. So getting people, asking other people, how is the team going? What's going on? And then people will say, oh, well, Jill's just done this amazing job. And you're like, okay. So,
do you think it's key to, even if you're remote first, to still ensure that there is some form of people meeting up in person, so you do get that inhuman interaction
I,
at some point?
I do. I know that it's not always possible, and for a variety of reasons. But for me, planning creative exercises such as planning and retrospective exercises like retros are so much more effective when done in person. You get so much more out of them, and then and it creates stronger bonds within the team. It allows people to they know how people are going to react with more effectiveness. So it reduces the amount of noise and kind of low level misunderstandings that happen in teams. So bringing people together for specific types of meetings, if at all possible, I think is an exceptionally powerful use of people's times.
Yeah, yeah. Just a last reminder: if there are any questions, to send them in before we move on to the last subject, which is talking about the role of mentoring and mentorship. Obviously, mentorship takes many forms, right? We've
It
got
does. Yeah.
actual managers, you can have team leads, you can have even senior engineers.
Yeah.
What do you see work? What have you seen that works in different situations,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how do you set up mentorship programs?
So I've been lucky. I actually, and Andy, who runs CTO Craft, was my mentor for a little while.
Nice.
And I've had a few different external mentors, which I think is amazing. It that can be more expensive for an organization to run at the sort of lower levels, but I think the key things for mentoring and coaching is that they're not somebody who has direct kind of input and reliance on that work. So your mentor should not be from within your team. They have that allows them to not kind of taint what they're saying by their own needs. In the same way that you don't want necessarily product managers to be delivery managers, because they're going to have pressure on them to not deal with technical debt, for example. Having a mentor who is within your team or kind of close to it may mean that their answers are to do with you delivering what they need, which is not right. I think mentors can be subject matter experts in your field, and I think that they can be people who are just really good at asking questions. Smart people. They don't need to necessarily be technical in any way, shape, or form, but they will ask you really good questions that will be very revealing. They can take you down routes that will really help you flourish. And also relieve stress. It is a little bit of a shoulder to cry on sometimes.
I think there are many benefits to it, right?
Yeah.
You can give it as a responsibility to somebody that you think is an up and coming leader, and that will help them to develop. I think it's good for delegation from you being, a leader needing to help multiple people. If you spread that out amongst, the team, you're encouraging them to become future leaders, and also it's alleviating some work pressure for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So, and I think that's all we've got time for.
Yeah,
So
I can see we've got a question.
have we? Okay,
Yeah,
I
we
missed
do,
that.
which is a great question. It's from John Durant, who asks, leadership can be both a role and an attitude that anyone can have. How do you encourage leadership attitudes within teams, especially where people might feel uncomfortable taking the lead? That is a fantastic question. Absolutely right. Leadership is also an attitude. Not everyone has it. Not everyone needs it, but teams need it. And the way I think that you encourage it is by asking for outcomes. I mean, that's true across all. I mean, that is my, it was like literally, if I was to have a tattoo across my face, it would be, ask for outcomes, not for output, right? But it is to say to a team, this is what you need to achieve, right? How you get there is up to you, and we will support you. And I think that in places where you have you don't have strong leadership, or actually you've made the decision not to have any formal leadership at all, you absolutely have to ask for outcomes and let people get on with it and support them and figure out how you support them, and have lots of checkpoints and metrics around it. So that they don't even have to show off. They can literally just point at, I don't know, the increased load page, reduced page load or something like that, to show you that it's working. Because again, leadership is just a way of producing things. It's not a thing in its own right. It is just how we organize. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, John, for the question. So yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. If you have any further questions on this, or would like to connect with either myself or Sasha, I think some of us are probably connected already, but please do drop us a connection on LinkedIn. And thank you all for joining, and hope to see you on the next CTO Craft Bytes. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
See you.